Today we will discuss a very important and interesting topic of Indian political thought, that is Swami Vivekananda, his concept of socialism and his idea of social and moral regeneration. You know, friends, Swami Vivekananda, born as Narendranath Datta, was a Hindu monk and the most prominent disciple of Sri Ramakrishna Paramahansa, a religious preacher and the originator of the Ramakrishna cult in 19th century Bengal. Vivekananda founded Ramakrishna Math and Mission, which was later spread throughout India and beyond. Till today, he remains one of the most popular icons of enthusiastic and vibrant youth in India. Vivekananda took an important role in spreading and introducing the Indian philosophies of Vedanta and Yoga to the Western audience, to the Western world. He was perhaps the first person to offer, he was perhaps the first Indian to offer an original idea of socialism. He also gave a call for social and moral regeneration of India. In fact, his concept of socialism and his call for social and moral regeneration are complementary in nature. But before going deep into these concepts, let us first have a brief discussion on his life and times. Swami Vivekananda was born in Calcutta, the then capital of the British India, on 12th January 1863. From his very youth, from his very rather boyhood, he was a voracious reader and he had deep interests in the topics like Western philosophy, art, science, social sciences, literature, and including his undying interest in the ancient Indian, Hindu, old Hindu scriptures. And always he had this curious blending of spiritualism and rationalism. And this curious blend of spiritualism and rationalism drew him towards the Brahmo sect. But he did not get the answer he was searching for. Ultimately, he met Ramakrishna Paramahansa, an apparently illiterate priest of Dakshineshwar temple near Kolkata. And he accepted him after some time as his guru. In 1887, in January 1887, 1 year after his guru's death, Narendranath and 8 other disciples of Ramakrishna took monastic vows. And after 1 year, that is in 1888, Vivekananda left his monastery, the monastery Ramakrishna Math, and he left for travel. He took a great journey through the length and breadth of India. And that journey was known as the Paribrajaka. And Vivekananda traveled and he met many downtrodden people and downtrodden and poverty-stricken Indians. He got this face-to-face experience and held deep sympathy for these poverty-stricken persons. For 5 years, he traveled throughout India and then left for Chicago to attend the World Parliament for Religion in 1893. His Chicago speech had a spellbinding effect on the American audience, and he remained in USA and in other parts of Europe for for 3 years, and he came back to India in 1897, early 1897, creating a huge audience, a huge followers, Western followers in USA and in Europe. Vivekananda left for the West for the second time in 1899, despite his declining health, and there he met many people and made many followers in the West. And he came back to Calcutta on 9 December 1900. In this period, many persons, many important dignitaries, members of the royalties and members of the political parties, members of Indian National Congress, they came to visit Vivekananda and listen to his advices. And Vivekananda had deep influence on many contemporary and subsequent political leaders like Bal Gangadhar Tilak, Aurobindo Ghosh, uh, Mahatma Gandhi, Subhash Chandra Bose, and many others. He was unable to join the Congress of Religions in 1901 in Japan due to his deteriorating health, and he died on 4th July 1902, only at 39 years. There are two ways to approach to study Vivekananda. One is to treat him basically as a disciple of Ramakrishna and assessing his spiritual contributions. And other is to look at him as the main proponent of nationalism and socialism in India, and also an advocate who who inspired the Indian people for selfless social service. But the ideal approach, according to us, would be a blending of these two approaches. That is, we should take Vivekananda as a spiritual leader as well as a proponent of nationalism and socialism. In fact, this the above blending between the spiritual aspect and the rational aspect, that took place in almost all the important Indian political thinkers since the days of Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay. Bankim, the pioneer Bengali novelist and the originator of the Vande Mataram song, uh, talked of the inner domain of Indian culture. I quote, the inner domain of Indian culture based on spiritualism and the outer domain of the Western power based on reason. Vivekananda, an avid reader of Bankim, also was influenced by it, and he tried to practice this. He tried to blend these two aspects in his life and mission. And in 1897, he founded Ramakrishna Mission in addition to Ramakrishna Mott. Ramakrishna Mission was founded as a complementary organization because he wanted to inject the missionary zeal in a hitherto Hindu organization meant for monks and sadhus. Although Vivekananda was influenced and attracted by the missionary zeal for service, he wanted that zeal should come from within, that is from the soul, from the inner self of all Indians. And this approach, this way of this way of blending the inner with the outer, the inner self with the outer self, or the inner soul with the God, is to be done by the ancient Indian method of yoga. And Swamiji absolutely emphasized the importance of yoga in his works. But by yoga, Swamiji did not emphasize yoga as merely as physical exercise, but as something which will lead us to attain spiritual freedom. And he recommended 4 well-known paths of yoga. They are karma, bhakti, raja, and jnana. Karma, that is work. Bhakti, that is devotion. Raja, that is for psychic control. And knowledge, that is jnana yoga. Swamiji immensely believed that India cannot rise her head in the committee of world's nation if we cannot uplift the toiling masses, the downtrodden. And during his traveling days, he saw in his own eyes, he experienced the plight of the material plight of the common masses. And he was of the opinion that first we have to improve the conditions, improve the material conditions of the common masses, the downtrodden, the lowborn, the so-called lowborn, the Shudras, and then we have to morally upgrade them at such a level from where they can also see the plights of others, and so that they can be associated in the process of nation building and self awakening. And in fact, Vivekananda was the first major Indian political thinker who, much before the advent of Gandhi, thought of including all the common masses, common people in nation building. And he reminded us with this caution that the lower classes, and I quote, the lower classes, the ignorant, the poor, the illiterate, the cobbler, the sweeper, are thy flesh and blood, thy brothers. Unquote. During his Paribrajaka days, Vivekananda saw the plight, the economic degradation, the destitution of the poor in his own eyes. But he knew that only improving their material conditions will not do. They have to be upgraded morally. They have to be inspired morally. And for this, he emphasized the importance of the man-making education, a new kind of education which will instill self-confidence and reawaken the marginalized, silent millions. And Vivekananda thought that education can act also as a great leveler. And I quote from Vivekananda: the only way to bring about the leveling of castes is to appropriate the culture, the education, which is the strength of the higher castes. So, Vivekananda thought that by education, the caste hierarchies, the differences, caste differences can be also harmonized in some way where everyone will enjoy certain kind of equality and liberty. Again, Vivekananda put emphasis on the role of women in nation building. To quote him, he reminded us that women in statesmanship, managing territories, governing countries, even making war, have proved themselves equal to men, if not superior. Unquote. So by this way, Vivekananda uh, absolutely tried to assimilate the women in the uh, nation building process. And we all know that how much he emphasized the importance of the youth in the process of nation building and to build a socialistic India. Vivekananda has been the inspiration for the generation of dedicated youth, you know. And he emphasized that young people spending more time on football ground than reading Gita, because that is the need of the hour. And he inspired the youth to come forward, to work for society, to work for the downtrodden. He inspired the youth in these words: my hope of the future lies in the youths of character, intelligent, renouncing all for service of others, and obedient, who can sacrifice their lives in working out my ideas and thereby do good to themselves and the country at large. Now we come to his concept of socialism. In fact, all these things have influenced his development of his concept of socialism. In November 1896, in a letter to Miss Mary Halley, Vivekananda declared himself as a socialist. The impact of such a declaration by a towering personality like Vivekananda at that time was unique. In fact, through his fiery lectures, statements, for and inspiring lectures and inspiring calls to the youth and to all the members of Indian society to upgrade the conditions of the downtrodden, the silent millions, the marginalized millions, he was already practicing socialism without naming it. But in 1896, he declared himself to be a socialist. However, his socialism should not be confused with the Marxist kind of socialism, because he did not believe in the Marxist kind of class struggle, class conflict, and revolution. Rather, he wanted to found a just and harmonious society based on unity among different social groups. And he knew that socialism is a way to do it. And for this, he appealed for the youth that we have to make our Indian society a socialist society. But he knew at the same time that while bringing in the idea of socialism, one cannot avoid the question of caste hierarchy, because caste hierarchy was there and it is still here. And according to Vivekananda, and Vivekananda here, like Plato, thought that human society was essentially divided into four occupational groups based on their four virtues. These categories are Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras. So when Vivekananda thought of bringing in socialism or socialistic idea in India, he thought of seeing this question from the angle of the caste hierarchies. He related each of these castes to particular ages of domination. In his words, and I quote him again, human society is in turn governed by four castes: the priests, that is the Brahmins; the soldiers, that is the Kshatriyas; the traders, that is the Vaishyas; and the laborers, that is the Shudras. The first three have had their day. Now is the time for the last, that is the Shudra, that is of the Shudras. They must have it, none can resist it. Unquote. Thus, in his own way, Swamiji realized that the rule of the laborers or the workers or the proletariat in Marxist term or Shudra in his own term is an inevitable thing. It will happen. No one can resist it. There is little doubt that while he was touring USA and various cities of Europe, he came in contact with many socialist literature, and he was also aware of the workers or laborers' unrest in various cities of Europe. As a socialist, Swamiji was mercilessly critical about the upper classes, the arrogance of the upper classes, and he denounced the sophistication, arrogance, wickedness of the upper classes. And he rebuked the upper classes in these words, and I quote again, "You, the upper classes of India, do you think you are alive? You are mummies 10,000 years old, fleshless and bloodless skeletons of dead body of the past India, and disappear in the air. You merge yourself in the void and disappear, and let new India arise in your place. Let her arise out of peasant's cottage, grasping through plough, out of the huts of fishermen, the cobbler and the sweeper." So in this way, Vivekananda rebuked the upper classes, because he knew that these upper classes had exploited the Indian masses, the common Indian masses, for centuries. However, Vivekananda's acceptance of socialism was never wholesome. That is to say, his socialism was not unqualified, it was qualified. He took it only as a system to alleviate the downtrodden. His main goal, in fact, was to upgrade the common masses to the level of spiritual freedom so that individual can gain both materially and spiritually. Especially, he should be free spiritually. That was Vivekananda's spirit. And he accepted it because nothing seemed more workable at that hour than socialism. And he wrote in this matter, and I quote again, "I am a socialist, not because I think it is a perfect system, but half a loaf is better than no bread. The other systems have been tried and found wanting. Let this one be tried. If nothing else, for the novelty of the thing. A redistribution of pain and pleasure is better than always the same persons having pains and pleasures." So this way, Vivekananda qualified that he was for socialism, but he knew that it was not a foolproof and an all-perfect system. His main goal was to upgrade his countrymen both materially and morally. But he did not lay any roadmap for revolution like the Marxists, nor his socialism was the last stage before the final communism. Uh, he was more concerned about the degeneration of India because he thought if we know the causes for degeneration, we can regenerate India really. And this regeneration of Indian society would lead to Indian socialism. And Vivekananda pointed out the main causes, some of the main causes of degeneration of Indian society. And again, I quote from Vivekananda. Uh, the most important causes are: one, first is neglect of the masses; second, neglect of women; third, physical weakness; four, narrowness; five, laziness; six, dishonesty; seven, lack of self-confidence; eight, fearfulness; nine, neglect of religion; 10, untouchability; 11, blind imitation of others; 12, superstitions; 13, fanaticism; 14, communalism, and many other things. Such individuals who would fight the causes of degeneration, and regenerate India and turn India into a socialist society would not come from a different planet. They would come from amongst us. So the need, according to Vivekananda, was to develop a man-making education process which would instill self-awakening in individuals and make them look forward and come forward for the total upgradation, both moral and material, of Indian society. That was in crux Vivekananda's concept of socialism and his idea of social and moral regeneration.